Welcome to It's What Our Characters Would Do, the podcast where a neutral good ranger and a chaotic neutral warlock talk about RPGs, roll funny dice, and give away some sweet loot. I'm Bob World Builder.
And I'm Grace World Destroyer.
And today we're talking about Daggerheart RPG.
Whoa! Brand new RPG.
It's not even out. It's not even new yet.
Crafted lovingly by Matthew Mercer's
he
hands.
carved it out of a single piece of wood himself. But first, Grace, how are you feeling today?
I am feeling good because I've been playing Dragons Dogma 2.
What?
Which now I'm sure everyone has heard about how terrible the reviews were.
I don't know.
It got better.
I don't know how many gamers there are out here.
So it had like a 32% on Steam when it first came out because there are like microtransactions, kind of, but it's like you would only need to use them if you are consistently like hiring pawns that are like 20 levels above you, which you literally do not need to do. Like,
so it could be like a pay to win kind of thing.
Yeah. And like pawns are free if you go your level or lower. And then the other thing was that you had to pay like $3, I think, if you wanted to change your character's appearance.
Yeah, and that seems weird to me.
But you can also do it in game by paying with Rift crystals.
Oh, like a thing you find in game.
Yes.
Okay.
And then like the third thing was there was no new game option. They just added that like yesterday now. Anyway, the game is actually good. Like if you don't count the microtransactions, it is a good game. So I've been playing that.
Yeah, I mean, you were a big fan of the first one.
Yeah, I was. I wish the movement speed was faster again. Because remember I told you like the thing about it is your encumbrance actually matters.
Right.
But
you can't make yourself that fast.
Right. And I like to pick up everything that I see.
Yeah. That's what these games
are. Yeah, but you can't do that.
Running around,
especially if you're
stuff over,
if you're a tiny little
in that order.
Gremlin thief, like my character is, and your encumbrance is super low. But anyway, I wanted to share my pawn code because my pawn, Erin, is lonely and needs...
I feel like that's going to sound like the audio messed up, but that is the name of the character.
It's pronounced Erin. But the pawn ID, if anyone's interested,
maybe I'll put this in the description too.
Okay, if anyone's interested in hiring my pawn, who is like a sword and board fighter, is K02 RIH 843 RFC.
Da-da-da-da.
And then my pawn will be friends with your pawn. And then I can hire your pawns. Yeah. That's how it works. How's your life going? As if we don't live together.
I'm all right. This week was a little frustrating because I put up this video, which, I'm sure some people here saw, about like, hey, this is how you could like make a stat block have half as many words in it. And a lot of people didn't like that. but it's still like going over it. It's like, well, this isn't a public metric anymore for whatever reason on YouTube. But like the like to dislike ratio was actually still in the 90s, which is normal for me. But a lot of the comments were still just kind of enforcing how things that I talked about taking out, apply to certain rules of the game. So I really wasn't trying to say like this is like the way that everyone must do it, as I never do. But that is how some people like seem to take it. So it was just weird. Like it was just kind of fell off this week. So
yeah. How dare you suggest that things could possibly be different?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Normally when you suggest things be different, people are just like, play Pathfinder. But this was about removing rules, not adding rules.
Yeah,
so there's no alternative,
wordy,
right?
So.
It just so that I don't know. That was like in the back of my head and at the forefront of my head.
The back and the front.
Yeah, just
the
all
sides,
mixed up in there.
The top and bottom.
It was really wrinkling me out.
But not in the middle.
Oh, it was, yesterday was in the middle too. But today, we're talking about a different game. Daggerheart RPG by Darrington Press. the publishing wing of Critical Role. And let's hop right into our first segment, the quick build, where we try to summarize the topic/goal for this episode in exactly 3d6 words. Grace is going to roll.
14.
Whoa.
That's a lot to work with.
All right. And Daggerheart is one word, by the way. So we played Daggerheart. And now we'll talk about how that was for us.
It's only 13.
Yeah, I can't think of a good way to cap that without it just being a cop out of woo. Because kind of not woo. Like it was mostly fun. It was mostly a good time. But yeah, there were things that bugged me a little bit. But as the GM. But I think no, that's what we talk about now. Then in the second half is when we talk about people's questions and things. So what did you think of Daggerheart
my
RPG?
experience as a player, I thought character creation very streamlined, but also fluid. Like you have a good number of choices, but it's not so many choices that you're like, oh my God, I could do like 50 million builds. Which one is the right build for me? How many races are there? There's like
18.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of races, but they are very stripped down.
Yeah.
And I liked how it didn't give you like a set culture or appearance for any race.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. So you could really mix it up. Like my character was a fun grill.
Mm-hmm. Mushroom person.
7 feet tall, huge black eyes, but a tiny little vestigial mouth.
That you did use.
That I did use to speak. So maybe that's not really vestigial.
Right.
And then, let's see, the class options also very stripped down. So like each class at level 1 has like one ability, and then you choose your subclass, which then has another ability. And then you have your, the essences, like the valor, the domains, yeah. And then each character has 2 domains, and you get powers based on what those domains are as well.
Right.
So it all comes together in a very, like, interesting, not really random, but...
Yeah, just a blend.
Very, very well blended.
Right.
Like, you can mix and match a lot of stuff, which I thought was really, really cool.
Exactly. That's, to me, it felt like there's a lot of customization. Because each thing... Yeah, like you said, the ancestry, the class, the subclass, they'll come with 1 or 2. Well, and again, there's all these options to choose from, but then each one of these things comes with 1 or 2 features. So it's not like overwhelming number of features per thing. It's probably still as much stuff at level 1 or maybe level 2 as like 5th edition.
Yeah, but
just because we're going to be comparing it to that a lot.
You choose more of it yourself.
Exactly, but it's like you're kind of building this like puzzle piece.
Mm-hmm. And then each thing is a card, which I'm sure most people know about the cards. Everyone should know about the cards by now. Like,
if you're watching this video,
they've played it on Critical Role. There's cards, which are I liked them a lot.
It was kind of, I thought it was just more simple than like, okay, we have 1 book. Everybody, like, you know what I mean? Like so when you have to flip through like a ton of different classes or something.
You may wind up sharing cards with people at your table.
Yeah.
But it was nice to have it right there in front of me without necessarily having to like write it really small on my character sheet.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that I feel like this game is more accessible than D&D. The other thing that I liked and felt was accessible for people like me who are not good at math. When I know one of the things that you actually pointed out was, since it's 2d20, you still have to add 2d12s. You still have to add that together and then add like a modifier on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what they do for the modifier is you get these little like bits.
Yeah.
They're like just little plastic gems, and there's no numbers on them or anything.
Yeah.
But you roll them, like you roll a number of them equal to your modifier when you roll your 2d12, and then you just add up the little bits. So I just thought that was just a good reminder, like being able to count a physical object than like having to hold the number in my head made it a lot easier for me to do.
My comment on that was like, because this is something I thought about with the like custom stuff that I'm working on, how it's like I kind of want there to be a die and then maybe a number that you add to it whenever you're rolling, just because in my head it's like, you know, the static number and then you're having this randomly generated number, and that's quicker to do in your head instead of rolling multiple die where you're getting multiple randomly generated numbers. And especially then if you're adding multiple modifiers, which is like kind of the case in 5e where you have an ability, a proficiency bonus usually. I guess that's about it, but other games use more. So, but this, I don't know, it wasn't bad. And like you said, the physical representation of the modifiers is cool.
One thing that I kind of saw as, I don't know if obstacle is the right word, but each class has a different character sheet.
Yeah. I ended up thinking, like, my final take on that is that it doesn't really bother me too much.
What makes it, like, kind of a thing for me is that you wouldn't, like, just have a bunch of blank character sheets for a session 0 that people can just grab and do whatever they want with. Now you have to know, okay, what class does everyone want to play before they even look so that you can print out the correct number of each type of character sheet.
Well, and here's why I went back and forth about this. My final thing is like, it's fine because, when we'll probably talk about this a little more in a bit, but how the sheets are really well organized. Like they're laid out.
Yeah, that is true. Like the sheets are really cool. Like they're good.
Yeah, and it's better organized partially because it's built specific to each class. But the other thing is like, my initial take totally agreed that like, well, when we make characters for other games, we're usually doing it all together, and we host, so we'll just like print out the sheets ahead of time or whatever. But I think it is pretty common for people to make characters on their own, and I definitely think that's kind of like the type of player that Critical Role is speaking to with this game, like people who just want to make these deeply customized characters like with their own story, and then so like they'll probably print out the sheet, do that all themselves, and then when you come together and do those like background and connection questions, that's when you'll link it with everybody else. Or it's just really a matter of, if you're hosting, you just need to print, I guess technically you might want to have more than one of each class ready to go, or you just print it like again when your players are at your place. So it's not like a huge hindrance. And
they'll probably make some kind of blank version of it because people are going to want to homebrew. Yeah. And
it's almost weird to me why they didn't just have cards for the classes too. Because like they just have cards for like the subclasses.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And they have cards for the ancestries, but they don't have a card for the class because the class feature is just on the sheet already. And the sheet, it tells you your like starting hit point thresholds, evasion and stuff. That's specific to each class. But it could probably fit on a card. Maybe not though. Like it'd probably be both sides of the card for a lot of them because some of the features are long.
I think Aaron and I both forgot about our class abilities while we were playing because they weren't cards.
Maybe.
Because when we were looking at our actions, we were looking at our cards and not our sheet. And that's the only thing that's on the sheet is your class ability. That's a good point.
Yeah. Because it just like separates the information. You're like you're cued in to like look at all these.
But then also it's like you don't want to have too many cards either.
Right.
And you already have like 7 at the start.
At level 1. That's something I did think about too, is as you get, I don't think it's every level. We'd have to look at the sheets. We did not level up, we just played a single adventure. But you end up getting more and more domain cards throughout the game. And you can have, I think it's up to 5 in a vault is what they call it. And then like when you rest, you can switch things out of the vault and into your loadout. And I guess you become accustomed to knowing what's in your vault then, similar to how like any 5e spellcaster with a whole list that they prepare from. That's kind of how it works, I guess. You're just preparing features that day or whatever. I guess this leads into one of my other complaints is that between, we just had 2 players. So you probably had like 5 cards each. Between that, per player, you also have your character sheet on the table. You also have your dice and your bits. And this game pushes the idea of using miniatures as well. So we did that. And we normally have like food on the table and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So altogether, just with 2 players and, you know, a GM, it was pretty crowded. I feel like for the normal group, like we normally play with five people, well, 6 total, but 5 players.
We probably
like,
just wouldn't use minis because we usually don't anyway.
Yeah, but it's like if that's the style there, like I almost want to watch the Critical Role one-shot again to see how they were doing it. And I thought about that too because they play at this giant table. How were they all putting action tokens on the card? Like when they, you know, like if this card is in front of Matt or whatever, how are they like
throwing him at him?
Yeah,
throwing the bits.
I wasn't paying attention close enough when I watched, you know, the first half of it or whatever. So that's something I would need to see. But this is also my complaints about it is that even as a GM, even though I felt pretty comfortable, you know, reminding people to put the token on the card and me like cashing in those action tokens for fear tokens or spending them on moves, whether it was action tokens or fear tokens, like I felt pretty comfortable with that. But it was still just like a lot of stuff. And one thing I thought that like if I were to GM this regularly, what I would straight up want is like a tiny abacus.
That would be cool.
Because then you could just have, okay, action token. And you could sit it between yourself and like a player next to you who's just kind of like co-DM like a little bit, you know, have this like duty. Okay, anytime a player does something, you slide an action token the one way. And then when I go, I see how many action tokens I have. I slide it back the other way.
And you can use it to track your
the fear tokens there.
Yeah.
And you could even, if you didn't, like if players didn't want to put it on their sheet or whatever, you could even have like different color things for everybody's hope.
You gotta call Matt.
If only I had his contact.
Call Matt and just go, Matt, one word, abacus.
Tiny abacus. 2 words. Yeah. I mean, I just this week recorded like a video of my review for Daggerheart, and I talk about that at the end. And I do straight up say like, what did I say? I said like I say my email or something in it, and I'm like, we'll negotiate because I think like somebody's gonna make that. That was my idea, but I'm like somebody's gonna do that.
You have
and
to do it first.
If Daggerheart does well, but I don't know how to manufacture anything.
You know,
I don't
woodworking.
have these hookups.
You can make your own.
Yeah,
just
what
for
I'm
yourself,
gonna make. I'll be just like Matt, and I will hand carve one of these things for someone to use, and I'll just mail it to Matt.
How hard could it be to make an abacus? I mean, they're doing
no,
it.
it's probably pretty simple.
How old is the abacus?
Thousands of years.
Yeah,
probably.
I mean,
like
if cavemen could make an
years.
abacus,
I don't know. I'm sure I could figure it out. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't need to explain this.
I'm gonna buy you an abacus for your birthday.
Well, that's okay. Well, here's the thing. I guess here's my final take before we go to a break, or unless you have other things to say, is that I feel like I would probably enjoy playing this game a lot more than regularly running it. It's just my first impression after running that one session. Because I really did enjoy the playtest session that I was a player in. But yeah, I felt like having so many tactile and visual things as part of the game made it harder for me to imagine the game, which is like how I like to do it, I guess, as a GM. Like, it was just harder for me to actually visualize the scene because I was more focused on like the real things right in front of me.
Yeah, there's a lot of juggling of tiny objects as a DM in this game. So my comment was, honestly, even though the stat blocks are a lot more simplified for monsters.
Be careful when you talk about simplified stuff.
Oh no. It didn't seem any less complicated for the DM to run combat because you still have so much you have to keep track of.
Yeah, weirdly, that's so true. That like even though the monsters were very straightforward, and they would only have like I think 2 abilities each, and it was usually like one thing that they just do, and then another thing that you can spend fear for was pretty much how it went.
But I think I could do it if I had an abacus.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's like it was my first time running the game. So I'm sure it could be simple. And for some GMs, like, hey, that's probably like helping them almost like stay on task by like having these trackers or something, like in a way. I bet for some people it's really helpful. But for me, it felt like a little too much. I
am excited to see what they do if in terms of like publishing campaigns for this. Like, I want to see what that looks like.
It is supposed to be long campaigns.
Yeah.
That is also how it's advertised. So, yeah, they'd probably publish books like that, I guess, like similar to 5e.
Or are all the campaigns just on like index cards?
Or you know,
Just a
actually,
card
what it'll
pack for
probably
a
be though,
campaign.
because they also do really push, and this is present even in the read aloud text of the introductory module, really push the GM to ask questions and incorporate answers. So it's like, I don't know how much they would write out a campaign for you. I think maybe they would give you a part of a world, part of a setting, but I really think they like want the GM and the players to like come up with it.
Yeah, so maybe they just do like the setting books.
I don't know.
I mean, if their setting books are anything like Tal'Dorei Reborn,
Which I'm sure they will be.
The best setting book that I own, that would be perfect.
Sign me up.
Sign me up, yeah. I can definitely see myself running a campaign, though I would probably have to adapt how much stuff there is to keep track of.
So, to be determined. But we're going to take a little break and then hear from what you people are thinking about this. All right. Now it's time for a random encounter where we roll to read your stories and questions generally about this topic. I say that because we're actually going to try using the Draw 20 deck. Oh, my mic is farther away from the face than it should be. We're going to be using the Draw 20 deck. Not a sponsor or anything. I don't remember if or when I talked about this in a video yet. I feel like I might have mentioned it in the last podcast or something. But it's just a deck of 1 to 20 cards, of which I have taken out the numbers we don't need and then shuffled it, just because that way we won't end up like rolling a bunch of repeats when we're just trying to get those last couple questions. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and the person who wrote our favorite story / question takes home the loot, which I didn't say what it was. It's either a mysteries dice set from only Chris or a set of D12s if somebody really wants that. I saw like just some packs of like a bunch of random different colored D12s, which is really what you need.
For you and your whole party to play Daggerheart.
Yep. All right.
6.
Ron Wingrove. The single biggest concern I have with DH is the way everything is resolved narratively. This is a delightful idea, but ultimately puts the burden of, well, everything on the DM. From resolving combat to skill checks, now everything has to come with a little story of who and what and how. And that doesn't even touch the initiative system, in quotes. I'm sure there are people out there already shaking their heads and going, well, that's what DMs do. But as players, part of our job is to ease the burden on the DM as much as possible. For example, learning our own character sheets. As a DM, our job is hard enough as it is without having to come up with yet another conversation to cover a pass with fear persuasion check that doesn't duplicate the last 6 encounters with the same merchant. So I guess my question is this. Do you think that DH is actually a practical RPG system, or is it an expensive narrative framework with D12s thrown in somewhere for an element of randomness?
It is a collaborative storytelling game that emphasizes the collaborative storytelling more than D&D.
Yeah.
The game does encourage the players to share the narrative burden with the DM.
Right.
So as the DM, you are encouraged, if you don't know what to do, just say,
what minor inconvenience happens on this roll with fear?
This NPC is not interested in your persuasion roll. How do they reject you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing that Daggerheart does, like I said in the first half, does do pretty well. They tell the DM straight up, ask your players stuff. Like, make them come up with answers every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Which we've been doing that in D&D as well.
So yeah, they're telling to do it more often, really, which is nice. Yeah, not everything's resolved narratively because, of course, there are dice. Like, the dice still are deciding things.
Now, the thing about the initiative system, I agree with that because there isn't one. There isn't one. For a small group, like we only played with 2 players, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Me and Aaron just went back and forth saying what we were doing. When we rolled with fear, Bob took the reins. Mm-hmm. For a large group, we were discussing this after the game, and we use the Empress Tarot deck as an initiative system. We
draw random cards.
Yeah, we draw a random card
to determine who goes, is what that means.
Yeah. So that is what I would probably do if I was with a bigger group, just for the players, so that we don't have a ton of people talking over each other. And then, of course, if two people wanted to do a tandem action, which is the thing that you can do, like that would be
go out of turn
fine.
That round
they would just go out of turn. So do I think it's an expensive narrative framework with D12s thrown in somewhere for an element of randomness? No. I think it is an RPG system that is practical for the right people.
Yeah.
It's not going to be for everybody.
The thing is, I would say it's actually like it's a lot more similar to 5e than even I realized right away, just because of the like setting and the way the characters are broken down and stuff. So I feel like it's almost the same. It's just like you're moving some extra things around.
Yeah.
And again, not like extra necessarily, like it's more work, but it's just different.
Which is okay.
Same but different. Yeah.
Okay, next one. 4.
J. Kevin Carrier. I assume the system makes more sense in actual play, but just looking over it, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around a game that has 300 pages of rules. Yeah, 377 is actually the full playtest.
Is that how long?
Doc.
That's how long the document is?
They said that the core rulebook will probably be more like 200 to 250 or something. And yet everything seems to boil down to the DM decides what happens. Interesting. So it's like kind of the same take as what.
How much of this book is rules and how much is like, is there going to be a setting included in the book?
I don't know how much setting information there was, but yeah, it did have like basically all the info of the cards in there.
Stat blocks for monsters.
And there was like adversaries sections.
Yeah. So what? It's still...
There's a good amount of rules. Yeah.
Okay. Isn't it still around the same number of pages as the 3 D&D core rulebooks?
Oh, it's way less. Yeah, like the player's handbook is like 200 something. So it's going to be a similar size to the player's handbook.
But I get what J. Kevin Carrier here is saying when they say, and yet everything seems to boil down to the DM decides what happens. I haven't seen the document at all, but I'm assuming there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just like mapping too much of my D&D experience onto it, but to me it seems the same. Like it still presents the idea of like GM describes the scene, players say what they want to do, and then you use dice and or just describe what happened. It does say like you probably want to roll less because every time you roll, either the players are getting fear or getting hope, or the GM's getting fear.
That's true.
So you don't necessarily want to be like, I mean, and you can build up a ton of those resources, I guess. Hope does have a cap for each player, and but the GM could have like infinite fear then if they just like, 50% of rolls are going to be getting fear. Again, yeah, I just don't think it's that different.
2.
From Kevin Broussard. I feel like I haven't seen anyone talking about the domains. Some combos for classes are fine, mostly the fighter-esque ones, but others feel a little strange. It feels like some classes have an obvious domain and their second one is disconnected. For example, the wizard getting Codex makes sense, but Splendor is odd. I feel like Arcane, that does sound like it, yeah, it would be a much better option. If you wanted, you could make a wizard that basically felt like a cleric/seraph. Do we see that as a good or a bad thing? Personally, I'd like to have a closer relationship between domains so we can decide what kind of wizard we want versus deciding between wizard and cleric themed options. I think this problem could be solved by maybe adding the ability to choose domains at character creation, adding more options to existing domains, or even adding more classes so that domain wheel makes more sense.
I don't see why you couldn't just do this, but
it's definitely not built for it. It's definitely built right now that like each class has these 2 things, and these are what you choose your. Like,
I don't remember what my Splendor abilities were, but so I've read Earthsea, Tales from Earthsea, and the way that they define like men's magic versus women's magic in Earthsea is that men's magic is showy and big like an oak tree, and women's magic is deep-rooted like brambles. So from that lens, I see where they would choose Splendor for wizard, because it's like this glorious, look at my magic, behold.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were
Whereas,
going with this.
Whereas if you're doing like a witch type character that did more like potions and earthy magic, like a druid, you might choose arcane.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to look up the definitions for splendor and arcane in Daggerheart. But yeah, I feel like in general, to me, it's like the domain thing starts to feel like we're just kind of creating a bunch of terminology. Felt weird to me how it's like when each class is strictly like these 2 domains, then like will they ever add new classes? Like they kind of can't, because right now the wheel is like full when you look at it that way. So I do think it's a little like this, how strictly structured it is kind of odd, because you never are going to have like this perfect relationship. There is no perfect definition for what a wizard is. So like they can assign these 2 words for it, but different people are just going to feel like different words will fit wizard better for like the image of a wizard they have in their head. So
yeah, like I kind of got it, but that's because I've read this specific media.
Yeah,
that makes it make sense for me.
There is one section of the playtest rulebook that is just empty right now. The last part 5, is all about how to homebrew stuff. And they just had like some headers in there. So I assume they will talk about ways to mix and match these things however you want, and like make your own classes and things even. But yeah, right now there's no official ruling on how to do that, and I don't know that much about it. So yeah.
Man, I'm gonna have so many domains.
There's already 9.
I can just see you know how my pantheons are all like 20 deities. I'm probably gonna go ham on the domains.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks. Grace, ham on domains.
3, ham domain. Ham will be its own domain.
All right. Corey Horton, if you had to trim entirely or replace one mechanic in Daggerheart, which would it be, and or which would you possibly replace it with? I would not have like separate fear tokens be a thing for the GM. Like you got to have something named fear, or I guess the thing I would do is 1 fear token equals 1 action token or something. Like, and they're just the same, because that felt weird. Like players roll, they can get hope, or they create fear, but then like on their turns, they put in an action token, and then it takes 2 action tokens to equal 1 fear. And if you just got rid of like any one of those steps, that whole thing would be so much more simple.
Just replace it all with an abacus. Problem solved.
Yeah, or just get that abacus in there.
Yeah, I think I agree. Because like I said, the number of little things to watch as a DM would be personally my biggest obstacle to running this game.
Yeah.
12.
From piecompanyguitars.com. Okay, not a sponsor. Can you clarify the connection section of character creation, and how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? First, 1 wood. Second, the connections section is pretty cool. Without pulling out one of the sheets right now, basically, I think there were 3 prompts for each on each sheet.
And they're deep.
And yeah, they're
like
deep.
Very personal questions.
Yeah. And they're kind of specific to, like, they're kind of flavored toward each class. But this was also my critique that's in my upcoming video about the questions is like, hey, I really like that this exists, but like, dang, dude, can we dial it back?
One of the questions was like, for me, I had to ask Erin, what lie did No. She asked me, what lie did you tell me about yourself that I completely believe?
Right.
And I was like, my character's not like a deceptive person. My character comes from a civilization where it's impossible to lie because everybody's reading everybody's minds all the time. So my character would not have lied to you.
Yeah.
And then another question was like, I don't remember if I asked her this or if she asked me, but it's like, how did you save my life?
Yeah. And like one of the, when I was playing a warrior, I had a question that was, what non-combat skill do I help you with or something? And there was a similar one, like, what skill do you help me with? And so they're not every single question is super dramatic, but probably like 50%.
I think we just chose two of the more dramatic classes. So both of ours,
Maybe.
all three of them were pretty dramatic.
That's a good point too.
But I know why they want them to be dramatic.
It's
because,
Critical Role, baby.
Yeah, it's Critical Role. They want deep drama right off the bat.
That's the brand.
Yeah.
No keeping it light. Or you only keep it light when you break the fourth wall. Within those walls, it's deep as hell.
Deep City. 10.
From Conrad Sun 5. If you had to pick... Whoa. Oh, I thought this was like the same question. If you had to pick one mechanic or rule that screams, we thought about this way too hard and now it's going to overcomplicate gameplay, what would it be? How would you simplify it to make it better for your table? That's a really good question.
Maybe it's domains.
Maybe it is domains. Yeah. Because that's... And you know what? I would say it's domains. So my opinion, yes, is that it would be domains because it is exactly the kind of thing that I would do, where I want the game to be like symmetrical is not exactly the right word because there's like asymmetrical design. It's like a different thing in games, but I want everything to fit into place. Like when I would design like pantheons, it would be like, okay, there's 4 of them. So each one is like a season. Each one is like a compass rose direction. Each one is an element. Each one is like part of the alignment. You know, like so many, like I want everything to fit cleanly and perfectly. And that's totally what they're going for with domain. But it usually just, it's like somewhere it's going to break down. Like some of those links will be weak because you just can't do that with these abstract concepts.
Yeah. Meanwhile, mine is like every deity is 2 deities in one that are connected by a tenuous thread, and some of them have intermingled essences with others to create demigods, and each demigod also has its own domain, and those ones are alive, but all the real gods are dead.
Sure. I mean, and the thing is, like, I'm pretty sure your actual like system for that is probably pretty clean, but you don't put these like arbitrary like rules on yourself when you're making that stuff, I think.
Yeah, I expand beyond any arbitrary rule that I place for myself, so there's not really any point.
And yeah, I mean, deities is a good example because like IRL gods would have a portfolio with like really with stuff that isn't it like famously like Poseidon? It's like horses and the ocean or something.
Yeah, if you actually look at the portfolio of any Greek or Roman deity,
it's just like
they all kind of share. Like even Aphrodite is considered a goddess of war.
Sure.
So
that's it. It screams that this has been thought about too hard and will overcomplicate and could overcomplicate stuff because it's just too well organized. Now, ultimately, I don't know if it complicates gameplay, but it could overcomplicate character creation, maybe.
And they're making things harder for themselves to add things in later.
Exactly, because they kind of locked themselves
They'll
into this design.
They'll have to republish the domain wheel.
Daggerheart 2E coming 2026.
5.
Kendroid the Unique. I think the most important things to remember about Daggerheart is this. It's not Dungeons & Dragons. I was initially concerned about the GM bird and having to come up with consequences for nearly everything until I heard someone talk about asking the players. Okay.
That's what we said before.
Yeah. Yeah, we've kind of covered this idea. The tough part is remembering to ask for input, and I agree. I was still forgetting about that. Like in our combat, I said this afterward. I ended up like, I realized that I wasn't really describing much during combat. And when you guys would roll with fear, I didn't like come up with extra things, but I also forgot to ask you to come up with extra inconveniences. It was just whatever. Like we just didn't do it, and it was fine.
If we had the abacus, though.
Oh man, that would have fixed everything.
1.
Number 1 from Sime. I have been getting ready to run a group for playtest. One thing I thought could be added is the GM using fear at certain situations/events. Example. As a GM can carry over the fear to the next session or hold on to it. Maybe being able to use fear or 2 at the end of a battle to have players have trouble stop bleeding for an extra point of damage or to remove some hope as they're exhausted for being in battle, but they can use 2 hope to counteract this event, as long as it fits with the narrative of the story and its aftermath of a bigger event like a battle. This will help us use some of the extra tokens that get hoarded by both the GM and players can team up to counter these events. I think it sounds kind of cool.
I don't know. I probably wouldn't do that.
Well, look, I kind of get where you're coming from with this because my initial like readings about fear were like, I don't want to
Right.
like cash
But
in these tokens and cause problems.
Do you carry fear over to the next session?
I don't think so.
So
they're
why
saying
do you need? Oh, to just
maybe
get
you
rid
could-
of anything that you didn't use already?
Yeah, I guess. Maybe being able to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because they mentioned maybe being able to hold on to it.
But then
and
it encourages you
clearing the hoard.
to hoard your hope during the battle so you can avoid the fear overflow at the end. You know, like you're going to use your abilities less if you know something could happen to you after the battle's over.
And actually, yeah, I think that would be my biggest red flag is like, oh, but they, like it says, but they could use 2 hope to counteract this. I don't really like any kind of counteracting because it is exactly why people hate counterspell. Oh, I'm going to do this cool magical thing.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Like,
and nothing new and cool happens. It just cancels a cool thing without creating a new thing. And that's my thoughts is that even though I initially looked at fear as like, oh, I'm kind of like causing, like I'm making things harder than they should be.
And you can already use fear to interrupt a scene.
Exactly.
So
like you can already do some of the
you can
things
already
I
do
think
this. Like
are
you
being
can already
mentioned here.
make something like you can create like if there was a victory, you can use fear that you already have to make that victory bittersweet in some way.
Yeah. And what I'm getting at is like, well, actually, by using fear, like, yeah, you're probably making things a little more challenging, but it's usually in a fun way.
That's where the drama comes from.
Yeah,
If there was
these challenges.
if there was no conflict, then there would be no story.
So counteracting fear or hope, I think kind of defeats part of the purpose. I wouldn't do it.
11.
Simeon Snow, let us know what some of y'all's funniest, zaniest connections were from the group's building questions. It feels like narrative side of this game is what sticks out for the game versus the new fantasy systems competing for the replaced D&D slot these days. They're all really fun though. Personally, I'm hyped for DC 20. Cool, shout out Dungeon Coach. But I really love the narrative bits of Daggerheart. Do we have any crazy connections between your characters?
Not really,
Did she
because
save
our
your life or
questions were
whatever?
so deep. But the answer to the like how did I save your life question was my character had like a really bad sense of direction and wandered out of their subterranean village and was drying out in the sun in the mountains, and that's where Aaron's character found mine.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, I think the coolest thing that came out of our character creation was Shmim Shmilo Shmomp.
Ah, we haven't talked about Shmim Shmilo Shmomp.
There's not really much to say. That's about it.
Well, okay.
Mushroom deity.
Shmim Shmilo, not
really
technically not a deity. Shmim Shmilo Shmomp was my character's kind of guardian, I guess, guardian of all mushroom creatures, because it is a massive fungal hive mind that pervades the depths of the world. Like Aramikos, if you've played Out of the Abyss. But Shmim Shmilo Shmomp.
Yep.
Way better name than Aramikos.
Yeah, you should name your Dragons Dogma pawn that.
Shmim Shmilo Shmomp? I don't think I have enough characters to do that. So I'll stick with Yurit. Also, I don't think I can change her name at this point.
No, without paying a couple bucks.
Yeah.
Is that
8.
3? Oh, 8. Okay, wait. So this one's actually super long. I didn't realize that. Melissa and Kyle D. Bit of a preamble saying they followed some cool advice about creating like mini player or character sheets with cards like on their own just for D&D. So that's really cool. But they have a couple questions about Daggerheart. 1, what do you think of the card system? Do you think they should do wait. Okay, so I think that was the first one. What do you think of the cards?
I
We
like
already
them.
said we like them.
They are cool.
Yeah. Do you think they should do away with the D20 entirely in favor of 2D12s? Because the GM does roll a D20 in Daggerheart.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's like, again, is a little easier math-wise to just roll one die, but, well, maybe not if the GM is controlling so many different things on the same turn. It's weird, but maybe it should stay the way it is. And lastly, I can see a scenario where players can be killed in the first battle of a campaign just as easily as D&D with this system, despite the assurances to the contrary. I did a thought experiment with the Bertrand Bell level 1 build Travis and Matt did, where I take him out in 2 rounds. How do you think players and GMs can handle this new stress HP mechanic amongst the fact that death saves are gone and the only way to bring your character back from death is guaranteed is to take a permanent hit to hope? Thanks, and keep up the world building and destroying. We didn't really talk about the death rules at all, so I don't even know if you know how that works. But basically, if you go to 0 hit points, the options are your character dies, but you get 1 critical success as they go out. 2, you basically just get back up, but you permanently have 1 hope slot that you can no longer fill in. 3, you roll the duality dice, and if you roll fear, I think you just die. But if you roll hope, you are fine. Like, you're just back up and in the battle, and there might even be like some other bonus to it or something. But it's a 50-50 shot.
I don't know. I think that sounds rad.
Yeah.
Like Blaze of Glory.
Right, that's what it's called.
Actual consequence for death.
Yeah.
Or chance, just like D&D. And like,
especially at level 1, you're guaranteed to survive if you just take the hit to hope. So it's like, it kind of stinks that you might not be able to stock up as much hope, but like, you will live even if you go to 0.
Yeah, and I'm curious what they did to actually kill a level 1 character.
I don't know. I guess maybe I haven't read enough into that, because I wouldn't be surprised if, leaning into the narrative, there's stuff that say like, yeah, and if a character's down and somebody frickin' stabs them, #Mollymock rip, like, that's how it should work. So I don't know. There's probably more to that I just haven't read. But the intro adventure that we played specifically says something along the lines of, if characters get knocked unconscious, like, they're just knocked out for the battle and they like get up afterward.
Yeah, and I mean, if characters are easier to kill at level 1, or the same level of easy to kill at level 1, like, I don't know, so what? You haven't invested that much time into the character, so
I don't know. People are going to invest a lot of time into these characters that they make for Daggerheart.
That's true. For Daggerheart in particular. I mean, level 1 is level 1. Like, in video games, it's easy to die at level 1. You know? I don't know. It doesn't matter that much like, to me, I guess.
It's kind of, so maybe personally, it's just kind of okay. But also, I do think mechanically, there is a 100% out of death, and that is just taking a little hit to hope. So
maybe
that it says is permanent, but like, obviously on Critical Role, that's the only choice for death they're going to take anytime somebody hits 0 hit points, because they're not just going to do, Blades of Glory, got to have a whole new line of merch for this new character we're making next week. Like, no way that's going to happen. They're always just going to take the hope option for death.
Exactly. And then there's going to be some
deities or
kind
something.
of special magic item that can give you more hope, or like, yeah.
So it's, you're fine.
13.
From Scott Farley Film. What do you think about the species only having 1 or 2 real features?
Great.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm glad these last couple.
You don't need more than that.
Yeah. Like, I think it's probably in D&D 5e they get like 3, maybe 4, if you count things like Dark Vision as one of them even. So I think 2 is fine.
9.
From What If Brigade. Do you think there is a Matt Mercer effect on these rules?
There's probably going to be a bigger problem with Matt Mercer effect than even with D&D in this game.
A resurgence of the Matt Mercer effect. Yeah. What does that means?
Guarantee you, because this is
expect the GM to perform like Matt.
Like a professional actor. And because this is mostly going to be played by fans of Critical Role,
they want it to be exactly
the
like
percentage of people who will expect that level from the DM will be much higher.
Oh no. Yeah. So I think there will be. Okay.
7.
From Katie Wing. What's your opinion on the mixed ancestry options?
Is that a thing?
I don't even know how it works. Yeah.
Well, it sounds fun to me, because I wish
you could play a fungal fairy.
Yeah, I wish there was more mixed ancestry in D&D. So if Daggerheart is doing it, I guess I don't know what the particulars are, but I would find a way to enjoy it, because I would have loved to be a fungal fairy.
All right. And for sharing our favorite story/question, this episode's loot winner is Ron Wingrove, bringing up the whole is it all up to the GM or not? Because that's a really important topic for this game, I think. Seems to be good discussion revolving around that. So you are going home with either a mystery set of dice from Only Crits,
Or a custom abacus.
nope, not a custom abacus, or a bunch of D12s if you actually want to play Daggerheart. But that's up to you. We'll figure it out ourselves later. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and bite that like button. Please subscribe and consider supporting the station directly by joining as a YouTube channel member or as a patron. Our members and patrons get early access to every episode, and patrons get other cool rewards like a private RSS link to listen to your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for your support, and keep building.
Stop building.